So I've been meaning for a while to do kind of like a video covering what I've been working on. So if we start up an editor, when it opens up, you kind of get this project setup option. This basically scans the projects that you have under your projects directory. So you've got this .prg.n file. This is a file that you add into your kind of project directory, and this is actually what it's kind of searching for when it's trying to find projects. And then obviously we do have the option to create a new project if we want to. Now, I've just picked the default project here. So what we can do is we can go into Open Room. I will open my test level here, which is, if we move the camera here, you'll notice a few things popping in and out. That's something in the process of being fixed. And we'll switch to the actual lit mode here. This is basically what the editor looks like, or what environment loaded in the editor looks like. And yeah, the editor is basically a mesh-based system. So if we kind of draw out a kind of set of polygons here, or set of vertices even, and then right-click, that'll just immediately create a new brush. And then we can kind of select the faces and move them around. And then yeah, we can kind of then press the R key, and that will align the grid with the faces. So I can select that one. And then if we go back into here, we can then, like, say, add another polygon. And I've got like two different brushes here. We can also then select two of them, merge them together, and then we can move those around. And then to kind of go a bit further with that, you can even right click and export them as well. So if I was to grab a bunch of things and child them to this and then export that, and then I can basically then import that back into the map. And I think I may have a sample. So if I go import here and then prefabs, this will be missing some textures, but if I import that, we basically now have a kind of ship model here. You see there's a light kind of attached to that. So if I can adjust the grid here so it's vertical, you can see that this has just been imported as a whole thing. So it's kind of like a prefab. So as you can see, the engine kind of uses light maps, kind of a like relatively new thing. So beforehand I was using stencil shadow volumes. I kind of switched to light maps. You can see there's some edge bleeding going on with the light maps at the moment. That's something I will be fixing at some point. It's just something I'm not trying to spend too much time on, because then I end up spending hours upon hours upon hours just working on one thing for the engine, not really making any progress. One of the other things is obviously you can see those decals, so we can select these and move them around and so on and so forth. You can enable kind of lens flares and stuff, so there's a rather naff property editor here. You can see there's kind of a toggle here for the lights. We can turn the flares off if we want to. We can turn them back on, and there's different flare types you can set. There was support for dynamic lighting. I'm not sure if that still works. Oh yeah, it still does. So you can see the stencil shadows are kind of casting around and everything. I'm kind of surprised this is still working with a lot of the refactoring I've done. It's very bright, which is probably because the light is multiplying against the light map, so it ends up a lot brighter. Yeah. Anyway, as mentioned, you can kind of align the grid with different surfaces. So the advantage of that is that obviously if I've got like an angled surface here, I can kind of angle the grid to it, and then I can reduce the size of the grid as well, and then I can kind of like click here, click there, and then I can add kind of like additional details and things like that. And detail textures supported now as well, but they're kind of experimental, so they look a bit iffy in some spots. So one of the things with this engine, as you may have noticed if you've got a keen eye, is that this kind of environment we're in, or editing environment we're in, is called the room editor. Why is that? So basically this engine is using kind of room to room, kind of room portal visibility. So you have your room, you have everything in your room, and then that's connected to another room via a portal. There's a lot of other engines that kind of use portal-based renderers, and they do it in a very kind of straightforward way. Some engines you'll have like kind of a bounding volume around your room, and then everything in that bounding volume would be like room A, and then you'd have like your portal, and that would connect to another bounding volume, which is room B. Or there's lots of different solutions. But in this case, it is unfortunately at the moment a little bit unintuitive. So if I wanted to create a new room, so for instance, everything under here should be in its own room. I would basically create or align my grid to this surface, set out a polygon here. So if I hold down shift, it just creates like a single polygon. So if I flip this, it's now suddenly facing the other way. And then I can right click on this, go link portal, and then I can do new room. If I go TL1, I can do TL1 underscore basement, and then click OK. And probably very inefficient as well. But now I can start selecting these and move these to the basement room. So this is obviously then the other room down below is the basement. If we kind of like come around so the portal no longer visible, you see that all of that just disappears, come back through, and all of it appears. Now, this is not fantastically efficient at the moment. What should be happening is that everything is kind of clipped based on kind of the relative area of this to your frustum. That's something I'm working on. It's just not done at the moment. That would certainly make things a lot more efficient. These are basically, you can set these on anything. So if I right click on this, set it as a mirror, there's a bug at the moment which I need to sort out, but you can see now that this is reflecting the whole room. These are treated by the engine as portals in their own right as well, so they just operate exactly the same way as the other portals do. And you can kind of go a little bit crazy with these. So I can set this as a mirror, I can set this as a mirror, I can set this as a mirror. And yeah, the whole engine is basically designed around this, basically just having portals that can be anywhere and mirrors that can be anywhere and so on and so forth, and rooms and stuff. As mentioned earlier, the engine uses static lighting. One of the things with this is that when you've got models in the environment and you're trying to cast shadows onto them and stuff like that, it's a little bit awkward. So one of the recent things I introduced was kind of like a light grid. So this is actually not something that's baked in at the moment. So if I go renderer.show light grid, when the rooms are loaded, there's basically this grid that's generated. Every single one of these traces rays to every single light. So kind of determines how much light in the environment is that cell kind of receiving, and the direction the light is coming from. And then the idea is that if a model is kind of passing through the environment and in a shadowed area, you can kind of query the different cells for maybe several different parts of the model and kind of pass those in. I thought I'd try and make a slightly clearer demonstration of the light grid and what it's actually doing. I have a little test scene here. I've got a light over here. The light is being kind of obscured by the brushes here. So in some other engines, such as the Quake engine, in these situations, it would be querying the ground for a sample of the light map, and then the model would just appear completely dark. So because we're not using real-time lighting and we're not using real-time shadows, we need a way to query the lighting in 3D space while also respecting the static shadows. As I move this up and down, you'll see that it gets dark. And I'll kind of move it up here as well. Yep, it gets dark. Now at the moment, this is pretty simple. It's just querying based on the origin of the model, so it's in no way accurate. This is going to change. I did mention it's a fairly recent feature. And of course, it does respect the direction as well. So as I move this back and forth, you can see it kind of switching here. Later on, I will interpolate the values for these, so the transition will be a bit smoother. The grid has only so much resolution. We're just kind of blipping between each of the individual cells. And of course, one of the other things I may as well mention here is I do have like a rim lighting thing that I've been toying around with. It tries to kind of keep a highlight around the model for all the time that it's moving around. Right at the edges, it's kind of looking a little bit brighter, but that's something I'm still kind of fiddling around with. Anyway, I hope that's made it a little bit more clearer as to what the light grid is actually doing. So the engine has a entity system. So entities are like classes, and then each entity can have different components, and you can attach things to them as well, because they're just nodes in the scene like any other. And the way these are kind of implemented in the engine is pretty straightforward. These entities are registered through this really simple interface. So you just kind of declare the properties here. These are serialized automatically as well and deserialized automatically. That's just kind of registered through this register entity class method. When I designed this system, the idea was that mods and things like that would be able to register these and unregister them at load time. And I've kind of moved away from that approach now. Just static table probably implemented at some point or another. And then you can see as well here the different components. These are basically just blobs of data. So we've got a health component here, and then other entities can kind of query whether or not other entities have those available and vice versa. Now, I don't want to go too crazy with this video on showing too much. So if we jump into the console here, and let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, that's hopefully a little bit better. Let me make that a little bit larger. Okay, hopefully that's visible enough now. Yeah, so this is the menu, but the engine does have a console as well. And this basically has a autocomplete as well. So this is, whenever I've dabbled with the Quake engine in the past, this has always been one of the things that I've always kind of wish it had. And yeah, there's not a whole lot to say about it. It's just a console, so you can get all of your debug information from this, and obviously input commands and things like that. Let me just load into a test environment here. So I'll load into the environment we were looking at earlier. So I'm just going to turn that off. There we go. Yeah, this is the environment actually loaded into the game runtime. I'm not going to show too much of this because obviously I'm still working on it. The engine has very basic support for networking, and at the moment there isn't any synchronization. So when you start a room or load into a room, it does start a server. People can connect to that server. You can send messages to each other. All the infrastructure for that basic side of it is there, but actual synchronization for objects in rooms is currently missing, so that's something to do at some point. And yeah, it's not really much to talk about at the moment. There's a lot of work still to do. A lot of other stuff that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the material system a little bit, go into all sorts of things, but I think this video would go on forever, so.
Maybe. And you still want to find it?